Hello, everybody, and welcome to Jazz Edge Live, Ask Willie Live. I am the creator of Jazz Edge, Willie Myette, and every Wednesday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time for about 30 minutes, I get on live to answer your piano and music-related questions. So here I am. I want to say hello to all my students who are joining me on Zoom. Also, hello to everyone who's joining me on Facebook and YouTube. If you have a question, if you're on Facebook or YouTube, just go ahead and put the just go ahead and chat in your question. And if you're on Zoom, you guys know what to do. You can go ahead and chat in your question. And I got a question right now here from Steve. The Confident Improviser Rock lesson number 30 is outstanding. In lesson 29 with the pentatonic scales and quartals, is there something interesting to do in that in the left-hand quartals? I've tried arpeggiating. So the left hand, let me pull up the music for that just so you can kind of see. Give me a second here. Let's see. So that left hand, number 29, all right, and obviously there's all of the other stuff here, but this is what we're talking about, these quartal voicings. All right, so typically when playing these quartal voicings, there's a couple of different things that you can do. First of all, you can just comp the rhythm, right? So one thing you can do is if you're just going to put on, let me put on my iReal Pro Track. Bear with me for a second while I load this up. It'll be a little bit easier for me to demonstrate for you. Okay, so... all right, so now you see up there in the top right, you have the iReal Pro Track. So I'm just going to go ahead and play that. I'm going to show you some different stuff that you can do here. All right, so the first thing is just comping the rhythm. Let's speed this up just a little bit. It's a little bit slow here. Let's bring this up to 120. All right, so the first thing is, like I said, just comping rhythms in the left hand. You can arpeggiate them, but typically you're not going to really arpeggiate those quartals in the left hand. Of course, with anything, you know, you take it all with a grain of salt. You can do whatever you want, you know, so, but if we're talking typically, most players are not going to arpeggiate these. They're usually going to play them as straight chords. So it'd be stuff like this. So you see how I'm just comping those chords. That's one thing to do. The other thing you could do is you could do kind of like this root stomp thing, and it's a very much a McCoy Tyner kind of style, is to hit like the root and a fifth, or the root 5 root, or just the root, and then come up and then hit that major chord. Now, typically you might say, hey, wait a second, if I'm playing along with a bass player, I want to stay away from playing the roots down there. Yeah, well, you're not doing a bass line, so just hitting a root 5 like that, it's an open sound, it's okay. If you were to do something like, say, like this, right, which you wouldn't, it's obviously too low, that would obviously conflict with the bass because you got just way too much bottom stuff going on. But a root 5 like that would be fine. So you see how I'm hitting that root 5, and then I come up and I play the chord on top of that. So that's really how you're going to utilize those quartal voicings. There is a really cool thing, though, that you could start to do with these quartal voicings, and that is move them by, you can move them by any step, but try moving them by half steps. Listen to how you can get a really cool sound and start to go outside in harmony, while I'm still going to be playing that C major pentatonic or the C minor pentatonic, obviously depending on what chord I'm on. If I'm on the C major chord, then I play the C major pentatonic. If I'm on the C minor chord, I'll play the C minor pentatonic. But check out what happens when I start to shift these voicings by half steps. start to move outside some of the scales there. I've started to move, into some other scales. But you could hear how moving those chordal voicings by half step like that is a really, really neat sound. Now, where you can really start to see it is, let's just take this C minor, and I'm just going to loop that C minor sound. I could start to get some really neat sounds there. Now, the one last thing I want to say about that is the question might be like, well, wait a second, Willie. That makes sense for C minor, but that? Really? Come on. How does that make sense for C minor with a major third in there? Or if I'm going like up here with the major seventh, because you're not going to hang on that. Now, listen to what happens if I just hang on that. Obviously, it's not going to sound all that great. So this is a situation in which you have to have tension and resolution. So you can play around with that and mess around with that. This is all very much improvisational. So obviously you want to play around with it, right? There's no one set way of doing it. But that will give you some stuff to work on. Those chordals are great. If you like that chordal sound, be sure to check out my lessons on chordals and pentatonics. And there was another one I did on warm-ups and pentatonics. And then if you do a search on the site for this word right here, for chordal, all right, a lot of stuff will come up because there's a bunch of lessons on chordal voicings in the site. So hopefully that helps. Yes, arpeggios did not work for me. I like the shifting. I also did the scales at both hands. I've checked out the lessons. All right, perfect. Excellent. Great. All right, so who has another question? Anybody on YouTube or Facebook? Go ahead and answer, or go ahead and ask a question, I should say. Anyone else on Zoom? Go ahead and ask a question. If we have no questions, then we end early. So,
no, I do have one.
All right, Michelle. Excellent. What's your question?
It's about improvisation and melody, because I understand that improv is building a melody. But what I realize is when I listen to an improv, no matter where, from who, I don't really recognize the melody, because I recognize melodies of tunes I know. So how do I develop that kind of hearing?
Okay, great. Yeah, that's a really good question, because what I've said, a few days ago is that when you're improvising, you're really trying to create a melody, right? And improvisation should be like a melody. And so I think that definitely needs some further explanation, because you're absolutely right. Because like when I was just improvising just there, well, how the heck is that a melody? It's like, like how is somebody going to apply lyrics to that or even sing it? So really what you're looking for is those general overlying melodic concepts. And what that means is that, you want to think about things like direction. You want to think about things like density. You want to think about things like playing and resting. So for instance, if we take a melody, whatever melody, like we were doing Misty before, so... Right? So going through Misty there, and you could hear it as a melody. Ba-da-bum, look at me, I'm as helpless as a kitten up a tree, right? So there you could see that the melody has shape to it, right? So we got to think about, okay, shape in my improvisation. So right, so it's kind of coming down, goes up, goes back down. It has some shape to it. There's rhythm baked into there as well. It's not just look at me, I'm as helpless as a kitten up a tree, right? I mean, obviously, all quarter notes, that wouldn't be a great melody. So the rhythm. So already we have shape That's one concept. We have rhythm. That's another concept. Think about the density, all right? So look at me, a pause, right? Another pause, right? Some of the notes are a little bit faster than some of the other notes. So you have some fast rhythms, you have some slower rhythms, you have some pauses, right? So the density is how much are you playing? How many notes are you playing? So if we take those same concepts, those same melodic concepts, and we apply them to our improvisation, we want to think, well, if I take my same example here, right? I'll bring back this same example, and we'll just stick with the C minor so we're not moving around chords. Okay, so now if I do something like this, right? I mean, it's just like, it's cacophony. It's ridiculous. I'm really not saying anything there. I'm not developing anything there. There's nothing that your ear is really going to be able to hang on to and say, hey, that sounded like something recognizable. So now if I think, okay, let me think about shape. Let me think about not just going all in one direction, right? So equally, if I were to do this, you know, like that wouldn't be a great improvisation either. I'm just going all the way up and coming all the way down and playing one scale, right? So shape, like think about shape. Think about the density of the notes. Think about the playing and the resting, you know? So now if I take those ideas in mind, like, okay, let me think playing and resting. You can start to hear how, like, I'm putting in some pauses. You see how I'm also shaping that that melody, that improvisation, right? I'm not just going up, I'm not just going down. I might play a little bit, play a little phrase. Now, here's the other thing, too, that good melody does. Typically, a good melody repeats itself, right? So like that, right? It repeats itself several times. So you hear that several times in the song, and that allows you as the listener to be able to kind of grab onto that. I could do the same thing with my improvisation. So you see how I'm like, like I'm kind of taking that idea and I'm building off of that idea. So it's less that when you're improvising, you're trying to actually literally create a melody that you would put lyrics to or that you would sing. Instead, what you're really thinking is you're trying to take those general concepts of what makes a good melody and bring those concepts into your improvisation. Does that make sense, Michelle?
Oh, yes, that's much clearer. Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So, and then a good thing to do is when you find melodies that you like, all right, analyze what's going on. If we go back to Misty again, right? Right, so you hear that part, that big jump. So then you say, oh, okay, let me try that in my improvisation. Right, so there are a couple of things I did there. Number one, you hear those big jumps that I was doing, right? But then I was also bringing in those arpeggios that we, right? We also got that in Misty as well, right? So that idea of the big jumps, the arpeggios, I could take those concepts out of a melody that I enjoy and then bring those into my improvisation. Improvisation is, I hate to give you a percentage, but I am. It's about half, right? Concepts. So it's less about, well, what are the specific notes or scales that I'm supposed to use for improvisation? Obviously, there are certain notes, scales, chords that are going to sound better than others, but too often students think that that is the holy grail for improvisation. If I just knew the right scale to improvise with, everything would work out great. Yeah, it doesn't really work like that, right? Because improvisation is very conceptual, meaning that in order to get better at improvisation, it's less about, a teacher giving you, okay, well, now you need to do exactly this. No, it's more of a concept. It's more of like, think about this, right? Now think about that. Now think about this, and try bringing those ideas and those concepts into your playing. It's one of the reasons why improvisation is so freeing and wonderful and exciting, but also so difficult, because no one can really tell you exactly, well, how do you improvise? How do you actually, what notes do I play? A good example would be, let's say you want to write a novel, right? And you're going to go and you're going to study with an author or something. Well, what is that author going to tell you? Obviously, if you're going to write a novel, the author or your teacher or your mentor, whoever it is you're working with, they're not going to give you the exact words. Okay, well, the first paragraph should be, they woke up one morning and then walked out into the woods, right? I mean, that's ridiculous. They wouldn't do that. Instead, what would a good author, teacher, mentor tell you? They would say, all right, well, I want you to go home and I want you to try writing a story based on a little boy who grew up in an Inuit village in Alaska, right? Okay, so now they're giving you some parameters to work with, and now it's up to you to kind of go and do that. So what do? You go home, you write it out, and then you come back, and then you have like this back and forth feedback of like, okay, that was good, I enjoyed that, but now why don't you try doing this? Again, concept-based. It's the same thing that we do here, right? So, you're practicing and going through and learning standards and improvisation. So then as you do that, you ask me questions, I give you feedback, and we go back and forth with that. But if you think of the mindset of concept for improvisation, like learning concepts and applying concepts, it'll make your improvisation work a lot easier. Okay?
Great. Thank you so much.
You got it. All right, River Sun, recommended a background for chorus for building an arrangement from a melody line and chord name like fake book or lead sheet melody. Yeah, that's standards by the dozen right there. Also piano accompaniment essentials as well. If you're interested in more of the rock pop, definitely do piano accompaniment essentials. If you're interested in more of jazz standards, do standards by the dozen. If you're interested in rock pop, you're like, jazz standards, I have no interest in ever learning those. I would still take a look at standards by the dozen for two reasons. Number one, it's great information that you can apply into any other style, right? But number two, you could poo-poo jazz standards all you want, but they're called jazz standards for a reason. Many people know the tune Misty or Fly Me to the Moon, or we're not doing Fly Me to the Moon in step by step in Standards by the Dozen, but those songs in Standards by the Dozen, those are very popular tunes. So it's always a great idea to learn those, even if you're not interested in jazz, because they're popular with people, and also you never know when you might need to do that. I like to remind my rock pop players that you could be going out playing GB rock pop gigs, but hey, someone could say, hey, can you do the hour of cocktail piano in which you're going to be playing like during dinner? Well, what are you going to be doing then? You're not going to be doing, Jump by Van Halen during cocktail piano hour. You're going to be playing stuff like Misty. Well, if you don't know how to actually apply and create some of these more jazz-sounding chords, then your Misty is going to sound... right? It's going to sound very more rock-based based on these basic triads and seventh chords down there, right? So it's always a good idea to learn some of that jazz sensibility as well, because you never know when you might need it. John, Willie, when I intentionally try to target chord tones from chord to chord during improvisation, it requires a lot of concentration. You bet it does. How do you do it so quickly? Do you just know chord transitions so well that it comes automatic to you without a lot of thinking? I do it quickly because it's reactionary, meaning that I can react to a sound probably quicker than you in terms of knowing where I want to go with it, right? Remember, improvisation is I can make it simple for you. It's tension, it's release. Tension, release. Just keep playing, right? So like when I do this this thing here again over the C minor. Now, you might hate that improvisation. It's fine. I certainly don't like it myself. But I just keep playing something and I'm keeping resolving it, right? Now, as we start to get a little bit better, maybe that's where you start. But as you start to hone in your improvisation skills, now we get, ooh. So you get to know certain chords, and you get to know, like I know on a C minor 7, and bam, that major 7th is going to give me a certain sound. So if I'm looking for that certain sound, then I might, hit that B natural there on the C minor chord. But really, improvisation is about that tension and release, and being able to release that tension quickly, right? A second part of this is also starting to be more comfortable with that tension. And you hear all that fast stuff that I'm doing, but now I come right back to this. These notes are going to fit really well with that C minor chord, right? So it's really about that tension and release, and it's just you keep playing. Do not stop. Just keep playing. It's that forward momentum. And we see this all the time with human speech, right? So do you know how there's like certain people, like, there's somebody that I know, like, he's very political and he's like a steamroller. He'll just like tell you all this stuff, and it's like you can't help but to just like, all right, okay, all right, yeah, all right, I'm listening to what you're saying there, or you just kind of like phase it out. But like there are people that are just steamrollers, and they're just gonna kind of talk something until they finally like drive it home to you that they almost browbeat you with their words, right? And it's effective. It gets you, it will get motion going on, right? It gets you to react. The same thing holds for improvisation as well. Now, that's not to say like, you just play whatever you want, because it's probably not going to sound all that great to your ears. The point, though, is it's that forward momentum. Too often when getting started with improvisation, we're thinking, okay, it's a C minor 7 chord. These are the notes that I can play. Those are my chord tones. I got to try and hit the chord tones. And then we are so held back because we're like not thinking about just playing and letting the chips fall where they may. Instead, we're worrying about hitting the right notes, right? There is a balance. I fully understand that when you're learning, and first starting with improv, you gotta try and hit the right notes, and you're trying to get there. So my point is this: keep going with it. It's really that simple. I mean, there's no secret sauce to it. You already improvise great, John. So now it's just a matter of getting better and better and better at it, right? So in order to get better at it, you just keep doing it more and more. Naturally, you're going to start to find notes that you like over certain chords. You're going to start to understand chord tones a lot better. And as you know that theory more and work that theory away from the piano, bam, what are the notes of an F minor 7 chord? F, A flat, C, E flat. If you didn't say it that fast, then you got to get to the point in which you say it that fast. G augmented 7, G, B, D sharp, F natural, all right? Bam, has to be that quick. You got to go that quick and know your chord tones that fast. But that is a long-term process. Years with a plural, all right? It's not a week. It's not a month. It's not show me in 5 steps, Willie. How do I know all of my chords? I wish I could do that. I can't, right? The only thing you can do is here's the material. Now you got to take the time. You got to learn it and keep doing it like you're already doing it, John. So I know you're on the right track. Let me just pump over here. All right, let's see. Over on YouTube, B Skills. Can you explain why the major 11th chord is rarely used? All right, so like major, like if you're thinking actual 11, like C major, you wouldn't use that. But major 7th with a sharp 11, you will use quite often, right? In fact, like using Misty again as an example, I could do it right there, right? Maybe I'll do root 5 down there. So you see how I'm adding in that sharp 11 in there? So I can add in the sharp 11 almost on any major 7th chord, but it's going to give you a very distinct sound, right? So typically you will not use that major sharp 11 all of the time, because if we think about, well, what is like kind of like the form and function of a major 7th chord? A major 7th chord is really kind of a point of rest, right? So if I'm playing that, it should feel like a point of rest. When I added that sharp 11 in there, right, it kind of creates some tension that needs to get resolved, or the ear wants to hear it resolved. So if I did that on all of my major chords, well, now all of the points in a song where I would normally have a point of rest, well, now I no longer have that rest. I have tension that's being created. Our minor chords add a little bit more tension. Our dominant chords add a lot more tension because of the tritone found in that dominant chord, right? So that's why you probably don't see as many major sharp 11, major 7th with a sharp 11 in tunes. You do find them, but they're not all over the place. And you want to make sure it's major 7th with a sharp 11, not a natural 11, right? Let's see. Josh asks, what is a good exercise for practicing extended harmonies? One thing that I think is great is work through your upper structure triads, right? If you haven't done your upper structure triads, which, by the way, I got lessons on that over at Jazz Edge if you're interested. But your upper structure triads are really, there are all of your extensions right there. For instance, let's say I'm going to take a G7 chord, right? So I take a G7 chord and I create an upper structure. This is an A major triad built off of that G7, right? Maybe I do build one on the flat 13, build one on the natural 13, okay? You could get a lot of great off of the sharp 4 minor, right? So that's C sharp minor. You can get some great sounding chords there. Right? So if you really want to get down your extended harmony, I would work through those upper structure triads. Now do that after you fully understand block chords, and then you know, like, okay, there's C7. Make sure you know your 9, your sharp 11, 13, flat 9, sharp 9. Make sure you know all of that. Don't dive into upper structure triads until you have a firm grasp of, like, oh, okay, that's the 9th or the 13th of the chord. But those upper structure triads will really create some cool sounding, extended harmonies for you. So I would definitely check those out. Now I want to arrange jump as a standard. Yeah, you should do it. You know what? Like, the funny thing is, like, when you take those songs that no one would ever think playing jump as a jazz standard or as a jazz tune, but you do it well, sometimes it can sound really neat. So I would like to hear that. Layanda, how can you really internalize voicings? Allie. Okay. Allie, or Lou. Okay, Lou. From South Africa. Thanks for joining me today. All right, so to internalize the voicings, you got to think voicings are like vocabulary, okay? The reason I do analogies is because, let's just lay the cards on the table. As adults, I think it's fair to say, now I say this because I've worked with thousands of adults over the years, literally thousands of adults. And what I notice is that as adults, we have a tendency to think that, like, oh yeah, sure, I can get that. Yeah, just show it to me. I got it. I should be able to get it in like 5-10 minutes. It's quick, right? We think we can learn all of this stuff super fast. And there are certain things that we can learn super fast, but we kind of forget that learning process, right? Because especially the older we are and the further we are from school, right? Primary school, grade school, college, and all of that, in which you're going through this learning process and you realize, okay, it's going to take years and semesters and quarters and all of that to learn this material. When we get further away from there, we forget just what it takes to actually learn something and to learn it well. We've heard that whole thing, I think it was Malcolm Gladwell, right, that said, it takes 10,000 hours to master something. I've been doing karate for 7 years, and I still feel like after 7 years, my goodness, there's so much that I need to learn and to get better at. So really, I like to have an analogy of other things because I think it makes it just a little bit easier for us to understand. So, for learning chord voicings or internalizing them and being able to get to them quick, and that's chord voicings, and it could be anything, scales, whatever. But if you think about vocabulary, how long did it take you to learn the vocabulary that you have in the language that in your mother tongue, right? So if your mother tongue was French or English or Chinese or whatever it is, how long does it take to actually build up that vocabulary to a point in which you could start to easily grab at those words, put them together, fully know what the definition of the word is and the word use, and be able to use it in a sentence and be able to do all of that without tripping up on yourself, right? So when we look at it that way, we realize that like, oh yeah, that took years, right? And that took years and years and years. How long did, our parents have to say mama, dada, dog, cat, bus? It's like it takes a long time. Now, there are good ways of practicing this, and I say this a lot about practicing away from the piano. Practicing those chords away from the piano, spelling those chords, spelling your scales, thinking about music theory away from your instrument, that is a great way of starting to lock it in. Josh, again, can you recommend a good exercise for harmonizing with extended chords? There's a lesson that I did that utilizes upper structure triads on the Jazz Edge site called My Ship, S-H-I-P. Take a look at that lesson, and that's exactly what you're looking for. Let's see here. Godfrey, can you show me 3 easy jazz licks in C major, please? I don't unfortunately have time to do that, but be sure to take a look at my Jazz Piano Daily videos. They are on YouTube, and also if you go back to jazzpianodaily.com, you will be able to sign up there, and those lessons are all free of charge, right? So all you got to do is go right back to Jazz Piano Daily, right? You see it right here, Jazz Piano Daily. I know it's kind of small, right? So go right there, and then you can go ahead and sign up right here, and you can get those free lessons. All right, back to my students on Zoom. Jude, Willie, thanks for the instruction yesterday on looping an iReel. I went through everything, and finally this morning turned off and back on and hit it. Actually works fine. Oh, perfect, excellent. Not seeing the Gems video on Green Dolphin. All right, I'll take a look. Maybe I forgot to put it up there. I'll take a look. I thought I put it up there, but maybe I forgot. I'll take a look afterwards. Steve, yes, I'm in a rock band, but doing the standards by the dozen and highly recommend it. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Yeah, sharp 11 is a great ending chord. So, right, so you can end on that like. That sharp 11 is a real nice ending chord. Ray, question on Green Dolphin Street, measure 16, 15, 16. Is it right to use the second half of the measure in 16, the B, instead of the B flat? That sounds much better than staying on B flat. Second half, let's take a quick peek here. Bear with me a second. Let's take a look at the shells. Measure 15, 13, 14, 15, and 16. Is it right to use the second half of measure 16, the B, instead of the B flat? All right. Go back here. So, second half of measure 16 is right here. Use the B instead of the B flat. Oh, it is a B natural, right? So this right here, this note right here is a B natural. Why is that a B natural when you have a flat right there? Well, first of all, it's because when this is written out in the key of C major, right? So no sharps, no flats, right? So this right here, this flat, okay, is good for this entire measure. Now, what about this one? Wouldn't that be a B natural then, if the flat is only good for this measure? Well, you might think that, but it's tied over. So if it's tied over, you don't play that note anyway, right? You don't play the second note in a tie. So this note right here is going to be a B natural, right? So it should be like, right? So if you use a B flat, yeah, won't sound good. Except if you were to turn it into something like that and add in some other notes in there, you know, like the flat 13, and it would create a sharp 9 sound. But this note right here, okay, that note should be a B natural, B natural. All right, let's see. Anyone else here? Godfrey, you bet, no problem. Larry, the photo key. Hold on a second, I missed something here. Okay, so thrill. Do the 5th, 7th, and 9ths directly relate to the circle of fifths? No, they do not. You should take a look at my video on YouTube. It's gotten quite a few views, and boy, people hate it. They hate me for it as well. And I basically say that the circle of fifths is BS. And not to pick on you, okay? I'm not picking on you, but this is exactly the reason why I say the circle of fifths is BS, because so much is made about the circle of fifths that somehow it's this holy grail. It's a great practice tool for sure, right? But it is just one tool in the toolbox. The circle of fifths has nothing to do with if I'm thinking about the 9th, the sharp 11, the 13th, or anything like that, or if I'm even thinking about my chord tones of that chord, has nothing to do with the circle of fifths. Now, I'm sure that somebody could do some PhD dissertation about how these things somehow relate back if you go counterclockwise and do this and this and this on the circle of fifths. Somehow, I'm sure you could probably figure out some pattern in which it works. But at that point, you have like utilized so much brain power to try and figure out this this formula for this, when really, you don't use the circle of fifths for that. The main thing that the circle of fifths are great for is that, you know, first of all, if there's one thing that the circle of fifths is absolutely fantastic for, it is seeing dominant motion. So if you go counterclockwise in the circle of fifths, that gives you your circle of fourths, right? So if I load up my circle of fifths chart here, hold on, let me grab it, find it. All right, so if I load up circle of fifths here, this this way, okay? So when I go to the left, that is my circle of fourths. That gives me dominant motion. And basically what that means is that if I had a C7 chord, where does it want to resolve? It wants to resolve to an F. If I have an F7 chord, where does it want to resolve? Wants to resolve to B flat. B flat wants to resolve to E flat. For instance, C7 wants to resolve to F. F7 wants to resolve to B flat. B flat 7 wants to resolve to E flat. E flat 7 wants to resolve to A flat, and so it goes all the way around until we come back to the beginning, right? So that right there is a great way of utilizing the circle of fifths. Some students like to utilize the circle of fifths because you could see, like, okay, if you go around the circle of fifths, it's adding sharps or adding flats if you go that way. So sometimes that's a little bit handy. The other thing that's handy as well is that you can utilize the circle of fifths to find your tritone quickly. So we know that this would be a 2. Let's see here. How can I do this? Let's do it this way. That would be a 2 chord, right? This could be a 5, and that could be my 1 right there, right? So I have 2, 5, 1. D minor 7, G7, C major 7, 2, 5, 1. Let's say that I want to change that G7 and instead have a tritone substitution. Well, what I could do is go straight across. Let's see if I can make a straight line here. I don't think I can do it. Oh, there we go. I can go straight across and then replace that G7 with a D flat 7. So rather than D minor to G7 to C, I go D minor, D flat 7 down to C. And those are just basic block chords, not really jazz chords, but it gives you the point and the sound, right? So that's where the circle of fifths can come in handy that way. But quite frankly, all of those things can be learned without the circle of fifths. So this is just a great tool to use, right, for some people because it's a little bit more visual for some players, right? But you should not think that somehow, oh, if I just learn my circle of fifths, somehow everything is going to unlock for me. It's not that simple. It doesn't work that way, all right? Let's see. Larry asks, just to learn piano, so pretty much I follow lead sheets. How do you select what songs to practice for non-gigging musicians? The songs that I do on my sites, I try and find tunes that, number one, I like, right? And number two, songs that are pretty ubiquitous, right? So you're not going to find tunes, I'm not going to cover songs that are like, like there's like tunes in the real book, like Hello Vamp, and it's just like one note, it's very abstract and whatnot. I'm not going to go through stuff like that because most people are not even going to know the tune or going to want to learn a tune. So the songs that I like to teach are songs that it doesn't matter if you gig or not. They're just great songs that you can play for people that people have a good likelihood of recognizing and a good likelihood of enjoying. So that's how I choose them. All right, let's see here. To clear it up, how many songs to practice at a time? That is a good question. Typically what I like to recommend to students for practice is when you sit down and practice, and if you actually go back to my main Jazz Edge site, right? You can see this. I'll show you where to get this. So if you go to the Jazz Edge site and you scroll all the way down to the bottom and you take a look at Willie's method down here, okay? This is the Jazz Edge method, right? So you see that there are basically two sides to this. There's your foundational work and your foundational work. So when you sit down and practice, I recommend that you start here first and then move here second. Okay? And then when doing this, you can pick any one of these three, right? It doesn't matter which one you choose, right? So like if you're going to sit down and practice, like, okay, maybe today you're going to work on rhythm for 10, 15 minutes. So you start with your foundational stuff, you work with rhythm first before you move over here. Most people are going to do this kind of stuff and do songs for the foundational, right? The point is this, you divide your practice into basically two parts. Some of it is foundational, some of it is fundational. Some students, they'll sit down and they will just sit down and they'll play their repertoire. They're learning songs and all they do is they play their repertoire. They never do scales, they never do technique, they never do any reading, they never do any rhythm work. They don't do any of that stuff. They're just learning songs. And if you practice piano like that, what you're going to find is that you will always be beholden to someone like me, right? You will always need to get onto YouTube for that next tutorial. You're always going to have to get sheet music, right, to be able to figure out what you need to play, right? You're not going to be able to really create your own arrangements or have the freedom to really just be able to pick up something and to be able to just to learn it because you're not getting any of these concepts down here and you're also not working on any of your technique, any of your rhythm, any of that kind of stuff, right? So you break up your practice. So if you're going to sit down and practice, let's say you have a half an hour, well, maybe you do 5-10 minutes of scales, technique work. Maybe you do another 5 minutes of rhythm work. Then you have 15 minutes to work on, at that point, I would say one song, because you don't have a lot of time. Let's say you have an hour to practice. All right, well then, usually I tend to say to students, do 1/3 of your time right here. So 1/3 of your time is here, and then 2/3 of your time is here. So if you have an hour, that's going to give you about 40 minutes right here to practice. With 40 minutes, you're likely only going to be able to have time to probably go through maybe 1 or 2 songs. I usually suggest not to work on more than 2 songs at one time, because that's a lot to do. If you're truly doing this, as you should be, then to also do more than 2 songs over here, you might find that that's a little bit challenging. Also, the other thing to remember is once a song gets to a point in which you basically know it, and basically knowing it is once you've gotten to about 80%, right? So you're looking for 80% of mastery of the song, okay? Not complete mastery. Once you're at 80%, then it goes into your repertoire, all right? And then in your repertoire, that's like your binder of songs that you know, and then you practice that at a separate time during the day, all right? What you do not want to do not make the mistake of sitting down and like, all right, I'm going to sit down and practice. All right. Let me do some improv. Right, so now, am I really practicing there? I already know it, right? So at that point, I'm not practicing. I'm not really trying to work on figuring something out. I'm just playing my repertoire. So many students start their practice session like that. And then this is what typically happens. They do that. Oh, jeez, I gotta go. Like somebody just called me, you know, like, wait, I'll be there in a second, right? They get interrupted, so then what happens? Now their practice session was literally just going through and playing stuff that they already know. So they never actually got to the point of doing something that they hadn't done before or something that they're not great at, right? Instead, a practice session should be, all right, let me sit down. Okay, let me go through some scales. I'm not going to do C major scale because I've already done that. I already know that. I practiced that 2 weeks ago. Instead, let me do E flat. Okay, let me slow it down. Let me cross. No. Right? That's practice. So when you sit down and you're trying to warm up, that's what you should do for warm up. Do this stuff right here, okay? Especially your technique stuff, right? The technique stuff is exactly what you should be doing for warm up. If you're looking for the technique stuff, Piano Essentials on the Jazz Edge site. That's all part of Jazz Edge Core. Piano Essentials, fantastic, right? If you go through that course, which is a big course and it takes a while to go through, but if you go through that course, your technique is really going to be in good shape, right? So you sit down, you're practicing scales. Right? Practicing through all of those scales. You might do arpeggios, you might do chromatic stuff. If you've gone through Piano Essentials and you're like, I got all that stuff down. I can play through all 12 major scales, hands together, contrary motion, no problem. Then on the site, I have an advanced technique boot camp. Take a look at that one. That will blow your mind. Now you're starting doing stuff like this in which you're doing 2 different scales at the same time. You know, like doing the chromatic scale in one hand while doing a major scale in another hand, maybe doing arpeggios. Ooh, that's a good one. Ooh. All right, so what I'm doing, E flat major arpeggio with a D major scale in the left hand. There we go. right? So you can see, like, that's practice. Now, obviously, I'm going too fast there. I would want to slow it down. But that kind of stuff, especially for the advanced players in the room, right? That kind of stuff really starts to stretch your ears. Oh, man, this is bothering me now. There we go. You hear how that really stretches your ears? And as far as your brain, boo, it's going to blow your brain away because you're going to be thinking about one thing here, thinking about something else there. You're trying to keep it all together, the flow, you know, it's definitely a challenge. But that's the kind of stuff that you want to do when you sit down and practice. So anyway, the answer to your question is I'd probably only focus on 2 songs at one time. Anything more than that, if you're doing 3 or 4 songs and you're trying to learn them, right now, that's going to be too much for you to focus on all at once. I would instead just focus on 1 or 2 at the most. All right, let's see. Lloyd, do you have anything on sound training? It just occurred to me when you said it was a sharp 9. I'm thinking, how do I distinguish, or can I, from a sharp 11 or any other chord sounds and melodies? Is there a way to train for this? For instance, using tunes as examples to think of, or other way to train your ears? Yes, actually, there is an ear training boot camp on the site as well. There are so many lessons on the site that most students don't even know all the stuff that's on the site. So if you just go on to the site, do a search for ear training, you'll find it right in there. I would definitely suggest taking a look at that ear training boot camp. Now, I'm pretty sure you're a Legacy No Bowl piano member, so that is a full Jazz Edge lesson, I'm pretty sure. Besides that, there's tons of apps and all of that stuff. If you go to the App Store and you just type in ear training, I can't recommend any off the top of my head. But the other thing to do is get into the forum and ask some other students. I know other students are using them as well. Here's the thing, though, about ear training is that, again, ear training is, again, like one of those things like the circle of fifths. A lot of attention is paid to this. I will see like people like online, and it's like, tell me all the notes in that, and it's like, oh, E, they say all the notes. Okay, that's great, all right, and to be able to do that, or like, okay, what are all the notes in it? You could say all the notes in that chord. Yeah, sure, that's great, but you should never look at that like being able to do that and think, oh, if I could do that, then I could play like circles around people. No, right? There's a complete disconnect between being able to hear it, but then understanding the theory and the execution, right? So ears are important, of course, but I've mentioned many times about being the total musician. Now, the total musician in my mind, right, and everyone's going to have their own opinion on this, but my mind on the total musician is somebody that has a very strong grasp of music theory and also has developed their ear as well, right? But it's not just, oh, my ears are great and I can hear anything. All right, perfect, but can you put that into practical use? If it's more like a parlor trick of like, oh, I could hear any of these notes and I know the notes in a chord, okay, well then great, but can you actually play that stuff, right? So you got to always remember that just because if you have great ears doesn't mean that you're a great player. Being a great player is more than just having one thing that you're good at. Being a great player means that you're like developing and being good at multiple things. So definitely develop your ears, but don't dive into that thinking that somehow there's like some holy grail at the end of that tunnel. There isn't. It will help you in your playing to have better ears, but music theory is super important. In fact, I would say I would focus more of my attention on music theory, because when you understand theory, you're going to naturally start to equate theory like, oh, a sharp 9 has that kind of sound. And I know if I put the flat 13 in there, it's going to sound like that, right? So just being able to hear, just being able to hear those notes doesn't necessarily mean that I understand the theory of that. The theory, I think, is more important in many ways than just being able to hear those notes. All right, let's see. Larry, that seems out of reach, but I look at where I am today and I thought the same. Damn it, take my money. Just go back to jazzedge.com and sign up, and then I'll be more than happy to welcome you as a student. Polychords, is that Orbis? So polychords, basically two chords stacked on top of one another. So a lot of times like something like that, or a great polychord, I'll teach you this one. This is great for a minor chord, all right? So take whatever minor chord you want. Let's take A minor, all right? Don't pay attention to this fingering. I'm just doing this just to move my fingers out of the way. All right, so do not use this fingering for a triad, all right? So there's my A minor triad. If I go to the 7th, right, or the flat 7, which is G, and I make a major triad there, so that's an A minor triad here, G minor triad there. And typically how that would be written is something like, like this. It would be written like this, like G over A minor. Oops, sorry, there we go, okay? And really what that chord is, it's an A minor 9, right? 9/11 actually. There's your 9th and there's your 11th. Okay, so that's two chords stacked on top of one another, right? That is different than this. Slash A. Whoops, A. Forget the minor part there. I don't want to confuse you. That is that. And that's not a polychord. It's not necessarily two chords going on. This is a G chord with A in the bass, right? So polychords, two chords stacked on top of one another. You could think of even stuff like your upper structure triads as being polychords as well. C7 with a D major triad on top. Okay. Let's see. Godfrey, can you please answer my question? Let's see. You wanted the breakdown of some song? Yeah, sorry, I don't do that on these free training sessions. I'm not gonna take the time and break down a song. That's something, if you want to sign up on the site and you want to join me for coaching, you want to sign up for a private lesson, I'm more than happy to help you with that. These sessions are really just like if you have music related questions, not like, hey, can you teach me piano? It's kind of hard to do that in 60 minutes or 30 minutes. So if you want to be a student, I'm more than happy to help you, right? All right, so that is it for today. I know, Bruce, you had a comment on ear training. Go ahead. You got 60 seconds.
This is just quick, Willie. From my experience on ear training, if you actively listening to your practice sessions, your ears will develop.
Yeah.
That's what I'm finding.
Yep.
Because when I practice the chord tones, and then I play the chord tones like one at a time, like we discussed a week ago, like adding the 3rd, adding the 7th, adding the 9th, all of a sudden, when I'm improvising now, I'm kind of hearing what I want to play in advance.
Yep.
So I think it happens naturally if you're listening to your practicing.
Well, and then also, let's not forget listening to other players as well.
Right.
So like, putting on an album of Bill Evans, like that kind of stuff is really good. And I just want to show you guys this. I just did a search here for ear training, and you can see that a bunch of stuff comes up here, right? So you got all of these ear training boot camp lessons, solfege. I mean, there's quite a bit of stuff here for ear training on the site. So just do a search for ear training, and you'll find a bunch of stuff. I would start there first, obviously, because the ear training lessons on the site are not just like me being like, okay, what chord is that, and you got to figure it out. No, it's also learning rhythm, it's learning solfege, it's learning dictation, because that's really what ear training is about. Like when I did ear training at Berkeley, it's not just like, oh, can you pick out what note that is? Well, no, that's part of it, but it's also, we did things like, imagine you didn't have the virtual keyboard there to see the notes. It'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? And then you would have to write that out. relatively simple, right? But if you've never done it before, now you got to get the rhythm, you got to be able to write it, yeah, you have to be able to get the notes. And typically what teachers would do is they would play it a few times, and then that was it. That's exactly what I did in that ear training boot camp. All right. If I remember correctly, I think I played the example 3 or 4 times. There's no virtual keyboard, so it really forces you to try and pick out what that melody is that you're hearing. And the beauty is all of it is written in the sheet music, so you can like try it and then check the music and see if you're right. Right. So if you're interested in ear training, I would definitely go in that route first. All right. That's the ear training boot camps on the Jazz Edge site. That would be the place to start. There's a lot of material there, and there's a lot of material to cover. I would start with that first. Then if you want to do the apps or any of that kind of stuff, you can go ahead and do that as well. All right. And I know, Jude, you know, I know other people have ear training courses as well. I would say check out my ear training course first, right? If you're a member of the site, before you go and buy another course, maybe you might want to check out the one that you've already been paying for and you already have access to as a member, because I took a lot of that same Berkeley mentality and brought that into my ear training course. So I think you'll like it, and I think it would really work out well for you. All right. Okay. So, Jude, you had an ear training comment. Go ahead, and we're going to finish up with you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Willie. Yes, I've gone through your ear training course, and it's excellent.
Oh, good.
And
Okay.
and I was going to say that it was because of doing the ear training before personally anything else that I've been able to go on the different sites that you suggest. Listen to different players and actually hear something, because I've learned to identify all of the things that you have in ear training. And thank you very much.
Good. I'm glad it worked out for you. Awesome. Okay, and I think, yeah, all right, so we are all good. All right, so everyone, thank you very much for joining me. If I didn't get a chance to answer your question, I know there were a few more comments on YouTube. So if I didn't get a chance to answer your question, I apologize. I will be on next Wednesday, though, so be sure to join me next week. I actually, just before I say that, I want to make sure. Actually, next Wednesday, we are not having a live session. I am actually going to be out of town as I look at my schedule. All right, so there will be no live session next Wednesday. However, we will be back. Let me just check my schedule one more time here. We will be back the following Wednesday. Yes. So Wednesday, August 11th will be the next Ask Willie Live. Nothing next Wednesday, but August 11th will be the next live Ask Willie session. All right? So thanks to everyone for joining me, and I will see you guys in that next session. Thanks.